My modern philosophy midterm exam, covering Descartes, Spinoza, and Leibniz. Question 1. Descartes. What's going on in the cogito passage? Present your view and justify it. To begin, there's a bit of a difference between what Descartes thinks he's accomplished with the cogito passage and what he actually succeeds in doing. The cogito specifically is the following argument. I think. Anything that thinks must exist, so I exist. It's deceptively simple. Descartes would likely tell us that he is using epistemic doubt to find the truth, that is, doubting everything to discover what, if anything, cannot be doubted. He believes he is proving his own existence, discovering his undoubtable point, and that by finding his undoubtable point, Descartes thinks he is a safe place to turn towards proving God's existence, which is the foundation of a world outside Descartes' own thoughts. He thinks he's well on his way to establish his science and basically rebuild knowledge of the world. What I find in the cogito is a little different. What Descartes is really doing is putting a limit on skepticism. Descartes' doubt is an intellectual exercise, but he doesn't really follow it up. He fails to provide a full account against skepticism because he assumes his argument is sound, safely undoubtable. Descartes thinks that if he exists, then he is safe to start to figure out what other things might exist that he can be certain of. But his assumption is problematic, the assumption that there is an I to speak of. Clearly, thinking is happening, but it's not quite the proof of Descartes' existence, or persisting identity. Further, he puts too much weight in his arguments for God's existence. His skepticism demands theism as an antidote, and he uses faith in God's existence as a foundation to rebuild science. But his arguments for God are not irrefutable. So while Descartes' method of epistemic doubt seems impressive, there are other ways to go about finding knowledge. Descartes is extremely stripping away, but much more generous in his putting things back together. What he really manages to do in the cogito passage is prove something cannot be doubted, that thinking is occurring, without considering very well his next step. Question 2. Spinoza. What is Spinoza's theory of blessedness and the intellectual love of God? God is impersonal. There's no sense in ascribing personality to God, because God is a separate conscious being. To Spinoza, such thinking is childish anthropomorphism. Nature. God is nature. God is both the laws of nature, cause, and every working instance of those laws, effect. Everything that exists. Spinoza is a monist and a pantheist, holding that God is everything and everything is God. Given all of this, how are we supposed to love the impersonal God that exists in everything? We must acknowledge that our love for God is not to be returned, not from spite, but inability. It is a category mistake to expect God to love us in return. Quote, Spinoza stated quite plainly that we should love God, but he also says we are crazy if we should expect God to love us in return. That doesn't mean our love is pointless. Love for God brings freedom and harmony because we know, quote, the truth about the world and your own place in it, and thereby understand the true causes of your decisions, which is the only kind of freedom of which humans are capable. End quote. Another comment. Quote, such understanding transforms our limited specific perspectives from which is so much around us seems contingently threatening to a global, impersonal, embracing vision of things, seeing things from the perspective of the universe, in which everything has its place, and in so which we immunize ourselves against the fear of death. End quote. Blessedness, to Spinoza, is human well-being brought on by a reason that fosters freedom, harmony with others, and an intellectual love of God. This ties Spinoza's concept of God or nature, his psychology, which includes the theory of emotion, desire, and self-determination, into an ethics describing how we should live. We love God and nature by striving to understand God and our place in the world, For Spinoza, human beings are a part of nature and must be understood as such. Question 3. Leibniz. How does Leibniz's pre-established harmony differ from occasionalism? Does the former have any philosophical advantages over the latter? What is the relationship between the mind and the body? Are minds and bodies two different things? If so, how did they interact? This is the mind-body problem, and it was a thorn in Descartes' side. No matter how he tried, from suggestions of pineal glands to claiming that the technicalities didn't matter, the gap between his two substances always plagued him. In contrast to Descartes, occasionalism seeks to deny interaction and thereby get rid of the problem altogether. The problem for occasionalism is mostly that it is just too much of a stretch to believe. Quote, God is hypothesized to intervene at each step in a version of continual creation. When you, for instance, form an intention to raise your hand, God steps in and makes sure your hand goes up. Unquote. The theory multiplies miracles nigh infinitely. God is a cosmic micromanager. In short, occasionalism lacks simplicity and the simplicity and elegance of a compelling theory. Leibniz wants the best of what occasionalism offers, namely an escape from the problem of interaction, without the silliness of miracles occurring whenever anyone has to do so as much as needs. When God was winding up the universe, he set everything up to do, quote, what it does only in virtue of its position and role in the whole system, and its relation to other parts, unquote. Minds and bodies are pre-programmed with simultaneously unfolding sequences of ideas or motion, so it seems that mind and bodies interact without actually doing so. Leibniz has the cake Descartes so desperately wanted and eats it too. Pre-established harmony escapes some of the worst problems of occasionalism, but that doesn't mean it's the best answer to the mind-body problem. We have to ask, is pre-established harmony worth the cost? We must give up free will. For how can we be free if all our ideas and emotions were set up long ago? We also have to be at ease with a God that misleads us with the illusion of mind-body interaction. These costs are significant, but they aren't unique to pre-established harmony. Since occasionalism has similar costs and pre-established harmonies has fewer problems, I have to say the latter is the better